witnesses and survivors came to actually give their testimonies about what happened with Armenians during the Armenian genocide. And because it was already 1919, as you can see, there were about 20 sessions of those trials between March 26 to May 20, 1919. So Armenian Patriarchate representative was allowed to go to that court, to take notes, also to copy documents that were presented, and also to publish it in the Armenian newspapers. It was also published in Turkish newspapers, as you may know. In Turkish newspapers like Sabah was publishing these notes from the trials. And I chose a picture from Armenian daily Zamanak, which has the pictures of perpetrators, their crimes, and also witnesses' names and their testimonies. So I can say that Trabzon Armenian genocide is one of the best documented genocides, if I may. And not only these sources ended up in different Armenian archives, but survivors also wrote their testimonies. And this is this is a memoir of an Armenian woman who survived Trabzon Armenian genocide. And you see how beautiful is her handwriting. She handed it in 1919. Someone who actually donated it to Challenge Museum in Armenia. So if you go there one day, you can read her memoirs. And she's not unique, because those who survived the genocide tried to collect their memories and experiences and also publish it as a memory book, Hushamadyan, which many Armenians did. And Trabzon Armenians were not different. So they collected memoirs and their experiences, and they published it. It called Պատմություն Հայկական Պոնտոսի, The History of Armenian Pontos, which is edited by Hovagim Hovagimyan. And Hovagim Hovagimyan was a survivor. So he was a survivor of Trabzon genocide. And he knew all the survivors. He would reach out to them. He would convince them to write down their experiences, the names that they know, the events that they witnessed. And this was published. This is another great source. And of course, not many scholars worked on the genocide of Trabzon Armenians, but several did, including Richard Hovanesyan, who is from the city, and he actually edited volume dedicated to Pontus Armenians. And Vahagan Darderian wrote an article about Armenian children being killed in the hospitals of Trabzon. I'm going to talk about this today. So how the Turkish actually doctors experimented medications and killed many Armenian children in those hospitals. So, but the experiences of Armenian women actually they were mentioned by these scholars, but none of them studied the destiny of those Armenian women who were forced to stay in the city of Trabzon. And I'm going to tell you the story. So this is the view of Trabzon. I took it from hushamadyan.org. Hushamadyan is a very good resource for those who are looking for a pre-genocide Western Armenian life or Ottoman Armenian life. And this is a capture of a district of Armenians and Greeks in Trabzon. So Trabzon Armenians were a very wealthy community. They were very wealthy community. They were very well involved in the trade. As you know, the Trabzon was a port city, is a port city, and Armenians were very good merchants. They had very good connections with Europe, with Far East, and through the trade and through other crafts and art, they were connected, very well connected, and very well established. So Armenians had their own schools for men and for women, their organizations. Armenians very much involved in every aspect of Trabzon life, actually. And as a port city, Trabzon was very important. So the international organizations and missionaries and also foreign consuls had their own, places in Trabzon. So Armenians were very much involved with this elite and also with the Turkish elite of the city. So because they were wealthy, because they were influential. And to just give you an example, that Armenians could graduate in Trabzon, Armenian women, and then go to continue their education, let's say in Sorbonne in France, and come back to Trabzon. And there were this kind of women who were living in Trabzon in the end of 19th century and at the beginning of 20th century. But also remember the location of Trabzon. Trabzon was next to Russian Empire, right? It was also a very good place for a revolutionary federation, for IRF, for Dashnatutyun. Dashnatutyun had its own, members who were in Trabzon. Why? Because they could transfer weapons from Russian Empire to Western Armenia, including to Van, through the sea. So they could bribe the local Turkish authorities, and they could, actually transfer weapons. And the Turkish government knew it, and Turkish representatives of the city knew it. And it is not coincidence that Hamidian massacres in 1890s, when 300,000 Armenians were killed, started from this very city. So they knew what they were doing, actually. And but Armenian community in Trabzon also, they were not all revolutionaries. They were not all pro-revolution, anti-Ottoman government. They were also very loyal to the Turkish government, especially after the Young Turkish Revolution in 1908. They had connections. They were having, dinners and gatherings together. They were very much, as I said, involved in the elite life of Trabzon Turkish society. But everything changed. Everything changed when, in 1915 May. Why in 1915 May? Because this is the time when the first actually Armenian communities received the order of deportation, and the uprising of Van. Vanity Armenians refused to be deported. So, this is when Trabzon Armenians found themselves in a trouble. So search started everywhere. So police would come, knock the doors, and ask Armenians for weapons, surrender your weapons. You are organizing something against the government, so you have to. So people were arrested, people were searched, and this is what actually was a warning sign for Trabzon Armenian community. But again, because they were friends with Turkish elite, and not only Turkish, but the foreign representatives who were living in that city, they had hopes that they can convince the Turkish authorities that, they are innocent, they have nothing to do what's happening in Van, and they should not be punished for this. But May 1915, the first sign came when actually Georg Durian was killed. He was a prelate of Trabzon, so he was traveling to Erzurum for. They asked him to come for the questioning, and his carriage was stopped, and he was brutally killed. Of course, Turkish authorities said, "Oh, it's unfortunate. We don't know what happened. We don't know who is responsible for this." But it was a warning sign. So Armenians would gather to actually discuss what's going to happen and what they have to do. But, as we Armenians say, the day came when the community leaders were arrested before they could gather and decide what to do. It was June 24th when about 40 plus people were arrested, mostly community leaders, including IRF leaders, who were then transferred to the middle of the sea and all shot to death. They were all killed. And one man who could swim very well, his name was Vartan. He owned a restaurant in Trabzon. He was a very well-known individual. So this man could actually swim very well, and even though he was injured, he managed to swim, to come to the shore. He was taken to the hospital, and before he was killed in that hospital, he told that what happened with Armenian leaders. He told that Armenian leaders were killed without a trial, and Armenian community is beheaded, so we don't have leaders. So, and of course rumors spread, and Armenians knew what's coming. On June 26th, the official order of deportation was hanged on the walls of Armenian, quarters and a church and everywhere. And, everyone was given 4 days to prepare for the deportation. Only 4 days. It is pretty much the same if you look into the history of Armenian genocide. So Armenian communities would be given 4 to 5 days to, actually prepare for the deportation. But with one difference with Trabzon Armenians, which was they didn't allowed to buy or to use any transportation. So they didn't allowed to just, rent a horse or carriage or anything. It was forbidden, which was worried the Trabzon Armenian community because they knew that the weather, the humidity, the summer, mosquitoes, and even if you are very well prepared, imagine this is the beginning of 20th century, you couldn't survive that kind of journey. And it was harsh for those who prepared, but imagine those who have to do it just by walking. So Armenian community knew this is something big, and they also heard rumors coming from the neighboring provinces like Gari, Erzurum. Erzurum Armenians were deported, Kharpet Armenians were deported. The rumors reached Trabzon Armenians through their channels, through these, consuls like German consul, Austro-Hungarian consul, American consul, that these deportees were killed on their way, and Armenians knew this is what is, waiting for them as well. Women believed that they can do something. So what they did, they gathered and they went to meet a German consul's wife with whom they were dining, giving presents. She was their friend, and she refused even to meet them. They went to meet Cemal Azmi, the Vali of Trabzon, his wife, like all other Turkish, their other Turkish friends, trying to convince them to intervene on behalf of them so that they would not be deported. So, and all the doors were closed for them. And then they decided, okay, we're going to do the demonstration. They gathered together, they went to in front of the Vali's office and they demonstrated. They even managed to go inside to his office and give him letter saying, please send it to Istanbul. This is us asking for the government to not do this with Armenian community. This is a very devoted community. We did everything in our power to, contribute to the great Ottoman state. Don't do this. But of course, the plan already was there. And the Vali of Trabzon, Cemal Azmi, is one of the architects of the Armenian genocide. And it's not a coincidence that Behaleddin Shakir Bey, who was behind the creating of special organization, Teşkilat-ı Mahsuse, the killing machine of Armenians during the deportation, everything started from Trabzon. And they were friends and they were talking about their plans and how they are going to manage everything. But again, foreign representatives, including the American consul, was there, Oscar Hazer, and this is one of his letters to Henry Morgenthau sent on June 30, 1915, when he says actually that the Turkish government decided to, to allow women, old men, and widows actually to stay in a city. But this is quickly changed. By the way, before all these talks, all these negotiations on behalf of Armenian women and children, Armenians already started giving or trusting or negotiating to give their children to Greek community in Trabzon. They would give their children to Greeks, asking them to take care of them. Of course, it was hidden, and many actually survived that way because Greek communities saved them. But also Americans, they tried, and also other Christian, let's say, the Catholics were there. So they tried to save as many Armenians as possible and to save them from the deportation. Cemal Azmi, this is his picture, a young picture of him, and the old one from trials. As I said, one of the masterminds behind the Armenian genocide. So he actually decided that yes, Armenian women and children can stay. This is from his, this is what he proposed, that parents were allowed, whenever they so desire, to leave girls up to the age of 15 and boys up to the age of 10 in the city. So, and Armenians were very happy, so they would deliver their kids to the American schools, American orphanages, and Greek metropolitan. He was very happy to shelter Armenian kids. And many, before the July 1st, before the first convoy would be deported, would leave the city, Armenians were hurrying up to give their children. And also they knew that they might be killed on their way. So what they did, they also gave some wealth, some money, some gold to Americans and also Greeks in order to, to take care of the expenses of these children. As I said, Armenians were very wealthy, so they did give money, and they already knew what's going to happen to them. But this is also was not secret for Turks. So this is Bishop Christanos, who was a prominent figure in Trabzon, and he was very close to both Turkish, CUP, the Young Turkish ruling party members, but he was also close to Armenians, and he knew what's happening actually, and he said, okay, I will shelter Armenian orphans and Armenian women. And when he was negotiating, the Turkish government said no, the wealth, the money that Armenians gave to you, it's going to come to us, so we are going to organize the orphanages for these women and children. And then Bishop said, okay, then I don't need Armenian money, I will do it within the Greek community with Greek money, but allow me to take care of these Christian Armenian kids. And of course he was rejected. And every orphan and girl who was given to be sheltered with these communities, with Americans and Greeks, they were taken. And what they did with these girls, actually, and with children, they were taken to this place. It's a Turkish school of Zeytinlik, and it is a quote that I took from memoirs, from Zivat memoirs, a survivor of Armenian genocide of Trabzon. So she wrote that when they entered to a school, she's referring to this school, the Turkish school, we found a large number of children from Latin and American schools. And then Nail Bey came. So Nail Bey, he was the head of the CUP, the Committee of Union and Progress, Young Turkish Party. So he was in charge of this. He was very much involved in this Armenian genocide in Trabzon. So they separated the children from the girls and then ordered to deport the girls. But she didn't know that these girls were not deported, but they were actually given to the local Muslim community to convert them to Islam and to adopt them or to marry them. So these girls, they didn't have a choice but to become Muslims and to stay within these Muslim families. And a few, so what actually CUP leaders did, they decided to take Armenian children with few Armenian women and distribute them to different houses. They were empty houses of Armenians which were confiscated when they were deported. So, and they were completely empty because they were plundered. So Armenian orphans would be placed in those let's say orphanages, which were called like schools, and several women would be on charge of these children. And this is a memoir of one of the Armenian women who survived and who was in charge of taking care of these kids. She wrote that a few young women like me with broken hearts were working day and night to take care of those orphans and provide some food for them, which was not regular and not on time. There were no beds and children were sleeping on the floor, but the worst was a situation of newborns who were covered with dirt and constantly attacked by flies and mosquitoes. Those wretched children were crying day and night, and this was unbearable for all of us. And imagine that this house had its own mudur, the Turkish god who was, there taking care of things. So he was also bored with the cry of these children. And what he decided to do, actually, transfer these children. This is one of the houses that these kids were kept. So, so they decided to take them to the hospitals and get rid of them, to do some experiments, and experimenting on people. We know a lot from the Holocaust history, but we don't know that the first time it was actually practiced on Armenian deportees, and this is the case with Trabzon. And as I have mentioned, Genocide wrote an article about it, how they were experimenting on this women and children. So, and then they were, they were killed. But and also, but the girls were again distributed to the local Turkish community. Everyone could come and take one of the girls, and those who refused, they were either deported or killed. And when Russians took the city in early 1916, they found these massive collective graves of Armenians who would not obey, and then they would collectively kill. And those who survived knew where this crime took place. So the other thing that is not known from the Trabzon Armenian genocide is sexual violence, and to force Armenian women to marry, actually to agree to become part of Turkish community. They were also a public rape of Armenian women, and it was witnessed not only by local Turkish community who would come to the court and witness and give a witness account that this is happening in front of us, but also, Greeks witnessed it, Italians witnessed it, Americans witnessed it. It was a common knowledge what was happening with Armenian community in Trabzon. And so, unfortunately, two hospitals, Red Cross Hospital and Red Crescent Hospital, became the places where Armenian women were placed to become sex slaves. They would be raped constantly, and then they would be given as gifts. And the list of these women were found, and it was presented in a court in 1919, and we have it in the records in the archives. So they would give these girls to these prominent, CUP members, but these women survived, and these were the ones who came to the court to give their testimonies and to say that this is what happened with us. We became victims of sexual violence. We were forced to become prostitutes, and we were forced to marry these people and convert to Islam. So this was the destiny mostly of Armenian women and children who stayed in Trabzon city. So they either were converted to Islam, or were killed, or became object of, they became sex slaves. And when the Russians took the city, they couldn't find a single Armenian in those orphanages, so-called, like no one was there, no one. But what happened to those women and those Trabzon Armenians who were deported from the city? So there were 5 different caravans that were deported. Like, they left the city every day. Like July 1st, the first caravan, July 2nd, the second caravan. The last caravan was actually Catholic Armenians and Protestant Armenians. So the government assured them that they would be treated differently. First, they promised that they are not going to deport them, and then, of course, they deported them. And I should say that their destiny was not different than the destiny of other Armenians. So they were tortured and killed the same way. So, and when the first stop for Armenians was their Mendere, where the first time Armenian men were separated from Armenian women and children, and most of these men were slaughtered. And those who agreed to go back to the city were allowed to go back to the city because they witnessed the slaughter of their men. So they were given an option. They either go back or they continue the deportation. So some decided to come back to the city, to become Muslim and to come back to the city. The others decided to continue the journey. And the second time that they were massacred was in Genocide, which is 7 days away from Trabzon, let's say. And again, first they were plundered, they were taken, they took everything from them, and then they were massacred. And guess what? Not every Armenian obeyed this deportation, and there were Armenians who decided to go to the mountains, to wait there, and to survive this period. So, and these Armenians, there were 3 groups of Armenians, about 200 people who decided to go to the mountains, and they were the ones who also witnessed what's happening in Gümüşhane and what's happening in their Mendere. And they were the ones who, some of them would come after the massacres to look for survivors, and would find several children hiding behind this, killed bodies. And, they will join these people, they will join those who were hiding in the mountains. And these 3 groups actually had women and children among themselves. So what they would do, they would be relying on their Greek and Turkish friends who would provide food for them. So it was dangerous because Turkish police knew about them, so they were hunting them, and they were constantly hiding. But again, they managed to survive till Russians took the city. So they managed to survive. And the story of Armenian women among this is also fascinating, because to go to knock the door and beg for a bread was not the job for an Armenian man who was hiding. It was the job for an Armenian woman who was with them to go to do the job. So again, it was not easy for them to survive in those harsh conditions, but they did, and they survived. The deportees continued. They were from the very beginning. The destination for Trabzon Armenians was decided to be Mosul. I should say that Armenian Patriarch ended up in Mosul, and not a single Trabzon Armenian actually reached Mosul. Most of they were gone, they were killed. And but those who could reach, so first caravan was the first convoy was a convoy of wealthy Armenians. They had prominent Armenian families among them. So when they reached Yerzinjan, the Garneti Armenians were there, Erzurum Armenians, and there were a specific caravan, convoy of wealthy Erzurum Armenians who were very lucky. You probably know about this deportees. So they were lucky enough they had a lot of money. They would bribe Turkish authorities, and they managed to reach Raqqa actually. So when Armenians reached Yerzinjan, they were placed in the Armenian cemetery there to die. So everyone was already ill, no food, nothing, exhausted from their journey. they went through many experiences. So mostly those who reached the cemetery in Yerzenka, which doors were closed, they would die there. And every morning, the Turkish authorities, with the help of Armenians, would clean the cemetery. And Armenians, including Nevat, Mahochian, so these wealthy Armenians, they have, learned about Garneti Armenians, and they managed to bribe guards and join these Garneti Armenians. And this is how actually five Armenian families could manage to survive Yerzenjian or Yerzenka, the cemetery of Yerzenka. Many died in that place. But also, I don't want to forget how these Erzurum Armenians were slaughtered, because the Erzurum Armenian community, they can bribe the Turkish authorities and chetes, and they managed to reach the concentration camps with their men. But at some point, Erzurum Armenian men also were killed. So, and only when they reach Agan, some Trabzon Armenian women could actually not be killed in Agan, but sent back to Yerzenka and stay in a city, because a Turkish man named Ali Bey, was looking for women who could do needlework. So it's like, those Armenian women who can teach in my school needlework to Turkish women, I will save their lives. So this was the bargain. So 5 Armenian women, and you know what? He had 5 wives. One of them was forcibly married to him. He actually kidnapped her. She was Armenian, and she was convincing him to save many Armenians. And this was also her idea, saying that if you kill all Armenians, all these beautiful works of needleworks will be gone. So you have to actually create a school, bring Armenian women who would teach this to Turkish women and local women. And so this is how they actually survived, because they could do needlework. So they came back. And the rest, several women were saved by the governor of Aleppo, Bekir Sami Bey, who was a Wali of Trabzon before Cemal Azmi. So he knew these families, he knew these people, and he said, okay, this family should be saved and sent back to Istanbul, Constantinople. So this is how several families, again, very prominent family members, survived. Like few members survived. So in April 1916, when Russians could take over the city with the help of Armenians, by the way, 5 Armenian IRF members who managed to flee before the deportation, and then they came back and they gave the precise information about the Turkish army positions, which helped Russians to take Trabzon, the city of Trabzon. So when they took over the Trabzon, it was obvious that Armenian community is gone. So the only survivors were women and children in these Turkish households. And guess what? Russian authorities in the city said, no, you cannot collect these women and children. We do not want to have any trouble with local Muslim community. We are not going to help you. And they took their weapons and they said, no, you are not going to do this. So Armenians were very disappointed. They even couldn't claim their own community wealth in order to save Armenian orphans or feed them. So they said no. So, and it was troubling times for Russia as well. So, but again, Russian authorities were not supportive at all. They would say we are going to treat you equally, and you are no better than the Muslim community here, which was the policy back then. And but the Russian army had also ethnic Armenian officers and colonels who knew what happened. So they were the ones who would give weapons to these Armenians to create secret, armed groups who would go and collect Armenian orphans. So one of them was Bagrat Aleksanyan, and he actually helped a lot. And so Armenians were collected from houses and they were given their names back, family names back. Some orphans were sent to Batumi. The orphanage was established in Trabzon, and then it was obvious that Armenians were not safe there, so they would be transferred to Batumi, and from there to different parts of Russian Empire, and this is why we have a lot of Trabzon Armenians in Russia today. And some survivors who had relatives in Istanbul or other places were sent there. But overall, from 16,000 Armenians of Trabzon, only about 700 survived. And and they couldn't even claim when Russians were there the property of Armenian community. So it was gone.